Thanks, Caitlin. Hi, everyone. How are you? You can unmute and let me know that you're there. So I'm going to
We are
say it
good.
again. How, everyone? How are you?
Hi, good afternoon. We are good.
Hi, good night. Good
So I
evening.
have to
Good night.
apologize ahead. I'm
Hello,
feeling
good
a little bit
night.
low on energy, but I know you guys will energize me. So we look forward for a great meeting. Now, Latoya is not able to join, but I know we had two people that volunteered, and unfortunately, I don't remember the names, but I'm sure those people are volunteering, and we are going to do two or three things that summarize the last session we had. So, I don't remember the names. So whoever volunteered, can you put your hands up and start us off with a summary of what we did last session? Nobody's pressing up. Can anybody then say something? Tell us what are the two or three things that you learned from the last session? Nobody. Wow. You guys still there?
Hi. I learned about not washing your chicken. And
Yeah.
and ever since then, I'm so careful with what I do in my kitchen with my chicken.
Yeah.
Because I realized, it could be spreading a lot of diseases or bacteria. So
Mm-hmm.
that has made me more alert and more careful with how I prepare chicken and so forth. And a lot of things about food safety, how to handle your food, etc. So prevent food poisoning and so on, those kind of illness and sicknesses and illnesses, etc.
Thank you, Angeline. And Angeline, you hit it right on the head. So not washing the chicken is the key concept. But what you said is the winning solution, is being aware of why you shouldn't wash the chicken. And if you wash the chicken, the precautions that you have to take to prevent the cross-contamination. Because the reason why they say don't wash the chicken is to prevent cross-contamination. And the fact that you are aware of that, that's the winning solution. So thank you, Angeline. Anybody else wants to add anything else? I know the chicken was a big one. Takes a long time to wrap your head around that.
Good night.
Good night. Oh my,
Good night,
everybody.
Sharon.
That's
Yes,
your
please. I marketing, research, and analysis. Understand your target. Right. That's one. And generate. You see, sometimes I scribble down something. How to type
Okay.
and test. Type and test and monitor and measure.
Okay.
That's what I learned the last session.
Okay. So that was from the marketing. So that's good that you can link. Because remember when I started, I said all of the sessions that you were taking are interlinked. So as you listen to them, you have to put the pieces together and see the holistic picture of how they tie in together. So that's very good.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sharon. One more person?
You're welcome.
Anastasia. Hi, Anastasia.
Yes. Good night.
Good night.
What stood out to me is the sponge in the kitchen that you usually wash your wares with. How it can cause a lot of contamination and is one of the dirtiest things in your kitchen.
Yeah.
And the use of bleach. I mean, I'm always scared of using bleach. I don't like bleach, but I guess everything is about proportion and the correct diluting of it to wash your food and keep them safe. And also the chicken.
Yes, the
I
chicken.
still
We'll never
can't
look at
wrap my
chicken the
head
same
around
again.
not washing my chicken.
Yes.
But I would use safe methods in washing my chicken.
Thank
Okay,
you.
good night.
Thank you so much. Yes, the chicken is right. And the sponge, we talked about the sponge as well. And we know, and I have a little bit about that for some things. The sponges are notorious for keeping bacteria in them because they have all those little spores, those little pockets where the bacteria loves to stay. It's like a swimming pool for the bacteria. All right, so you everyone, Valentina, you wanted to say something?
Oh, good night. I kind of missed most of the session, but I do remember you speaking about eating like uncooked food, uncooked chicken.
Mm-hmm. Yes, great. All right, so thanks everyone for adding that, giving the
Or like when you
summary.
bake it and the raw mixture.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you. So today we are going to do a second part of this, but before doing that, I'll do a quick, let me see if I can. So we will do today, so we went to home hand hygiene and food safety. We talked about microorganisms and tried to understand why food safety is important. We talked about food safety in the Caribbean and why we don't have more cases of food safety because we don't report it. That doesn't mean we don't have it. In this session, we'll talk today about GAP, which is good agricultural practices. And then at the end, you have in your journal a farm food safety plan. Towards the end, we'll do a quick run through. I hope you guys had a chance to take a look at it. And as always, if you have questions, put it in the chat. I am also running the presentation today, so I'm not an expert at Zooming. So hopefully we'll be able to go through it without any glitches. And with that, we move to the next slide. So I have some quick facts, again, just to summarize. If you don't remember anything about food safety, remember, no matter where you are, there are 4 steps to food safety: clean, separate, cook, and chill. Clean to get rid of the bacteria, separate it so you don't cross-contaminate what I call ready-to-eat foods. That's foods that's not gonna be cooked or treated in any way prior to eating it. So like salads, tomatoes. Cook, and cook will get rid of bacteria in a chicken or in uncooked food. And keeping it cold will prevent growth, except for if you have, we talked about listeria, which is the only pathogen that will grow in refrigeration. So we have to be very careful to prevent listeria from getting into our food. So 4 steps for food safety. Other quick facts on wash your hands. Remember we said washing your hands by itself is not adequate, so we have to wet your hands with clean running water. I know it's not always possible, but the reason why you want to use the clean running water, that you are not cooling the water. If you have a basin, so what you're doing with the basin is actually washing all the germs in and re-rinsing it with your hands. So we say running water. We need soap, because remember we said washing is not enough. Washing will get rid of the dirt. It won't get rid of the bacteria. Soap your hands. We say rub it between your fingers, underneath your nails for 20 seconds. And 20 seconds is the equivalent of singing the ABC song. So in your head, that's way to target how long you have to wash your hands. If you go around in restrooms, you see people just let the water run. That's not really helping. Rinse your hands thoroughly to remove all the soap. Dry your hands, preferably with paper towels. I know that's not as sustainable as using a cloth, but the paper towel is a one-time use. So if there's any bacteria on it, you're disposing of that. In public, and I don't know how many of you do that. I do that all the time. If you think about, if you go into the restroom, you wash your hands, and then you go out the door and you use your clean hands to use the handle of the bathroom door or any other door, or even to turn up the faucet. That's recontaminating your hand. So what I would normally do is use a paper towel or a piece of the tissue after I wash my hands, and use that to turn off the faucet, open the door, and then dump that into the into the bin, the waste bin. So be very careful about hand washing, because remember, our hands touches a lot of stuff. And then cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting, right? So we have to clean, we have to sanitize, disinfect. We talked about the sponges or the dish rag clean. So remember, when you have your sponges or your dish rag, first prevent contamination, cross-contamination, and then always rinse out the sponge with hot soapy water, or let it air dry under dish rag. Because if you don't, and you leave it there, and you over time, bacteria, remember, it grows really fast. And that sponge can be, as you wipe your table, can be the cause of spreading bacteria all over the kitchen. We have to remember to clean all the kitchen surfaces, including handles and knobs of faucets, cupboards, refrigerator doors. And this one, a lot of people forget. When you season your food and your spice jars and your trash can, when we put the covers back on the spice jars, or we hold the jars while we are cooking the raw food, we are contaminating those ingredient containers. So remember to clean and sanitize that as well. Your cutting board, we talked about cutting boards. Your cutting board, first of all, to always use separate cutting boards. Or if you use the same cutting board, clean and sanitize in between for raw meat and produce. And then another one is, if you're using a sink, don't forget to clean the drain. Just like you have a regular drain, in your kitchen sink drain. Remember, you're putting everything down in there. So once in a while, you sanitize it, drop 1 little teaspoon of bleach, or use lemon in the sink drain, brush it out once a week or as often as needed to prevent cross-contamination in the kitchen. And then we talked about that again, the chicken. Let's prevent cross-contamination. This one is saying, do not use the same utensil to cut vegetables and fish or meat. And again, we talked about the chicken, washing it. If you wash it, be aware of the potential for cross-contamination, and how do you prevent that? So that's a quick summary for you to wrap your head around as we go into the next session.
Hi, Theo. I'm here, so if you're ready for me to help in terms of facilities in the presentation, I'm here to.
I'm doing okay now. I might need you to do when I get to the food safety plan. But right now, things are going, fingers crossed, going okay. But thank you.
Okay, great.
All right, everyone. We talked about introduction to GAP. Now, can somebody remind me what GAP stands for? I talked about it before I started.
Practices.
Good agricultural practices. Good. That tells me people are listening. Benefits of good agricultural practices and the principles of good agricultural practices. We'll talk about those. The objective is to understand the importance of GAP, recognize the benefits of implementing GAP, and then talk about the key principles of GAP. So what are good agricultural practices? So forget what I have on there. It's what you will see is common sense. So it's good agricultural practices. Just like when we talked about a food safety culture, is something that you do. It's something that it happens naturally. You wash your hands when you prepare food. So good agricultural practices, you'll see it's, again, common sense. FAO defines good agricultural practices as specific methods which, when applied to agriculture, create food for consumers of further processing that is safe and wholesome. And we'll go through each of those steps through harvesting and growing. So good agricultural practices, if you take a formal course, you'll see it has 4 pillars: economic viability, environmental stability, social acceptability, and food safety and quality. This session is going to focus on pillar number 4 and specifically on food safety. Now, the difference between food safety and food quality, we talked a little bit about it at the last session. Food safety is consuming food that is safe, that will not cause you to get sick. Food quality doesn't, consuming that food with bad quality does not make you sick. It's just the flavor and the taste. When we talk about quality, somebody had asked about shelf life. Shelf life is about food quality. It spoils the food, it changes the texture, the nutritional value, but it will not make you sick. So this session will focus mostly on the food safety aspects of that. So good agricultural practices, we'll talk about the routes to contamination. We talked about it a little bit last week in the kitchen. And so translate from your kitchen to your farm. Good agricultural practices, routes to contamination and species, both human and animals, our clothes, our hands, your footwear, your equipment and your tools, and illness and injury. So all of those are routes to cross-contamination. So what's the benefit of having good agricultural practices? It identifies and improves the safety of our food. It enhances the crop quality, and it increases market access. Now, some of you in the Caribbean might say, well, how is that? But if you have a good agricultural plan, a good agricultural practice, and you go to the hotels or people see that you have a good practice, they will be able to sell the food for you. In the US and in other countries, a good agricultural GAP certificate, people use that when they go and sell their foods and to the hotels and to the stores. So for Kellogg and company, and the bigger companies, if we are going to go to our suppliers to buy ingredients from them, we will not even talk to a supplier unless they have a certificate that says their farm has good agricultural practices. That's your entry. But for us in the Caribbean, maybe not so much, but if you can use that as a marketing tool, that will help you with your market access. It also promotes sustainable farming practices. And I know you guys did a little bit of that session earlier, and you'll see how that works. Also, it talks about hygiene and sanitation. We talk about hygiene in the kitchen. We'll look at it on the farm. We'll talk about the water quality and water usage, soil management, crop management, harvesting, and post-harvest handling. It also covers worker equipment and tool maintenance, packing and labeling, waste management, environmental stewardship. We'll talk a little bit about third-party audits for verification. And I know maybe most of you on the course don't have to do audits for verification, but if you are going to import your food outside of your little area, audits and verification becomes critical. and then oversight and enforcement. We'll talk about the lack of oversight and enforcement in our region. So what are the challenges that we face with good agricultural practices? So lack of local standards. So what I find is in the developed countries, all ISO and Codex, all of those programs create food safety policies. And when I go into the regions, and I'm sure it's not any different from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, if you go to the Bureau of Standards, you will find your local standards. Unfortunately, most of the standards have not been translated to local standards where it's applicable to everyone. I've seen some of those standards and they are very, very difficult for you to be able to translate them and implement them. And for the ones that's available, I don't know about St. Vincent, but I think in St. Lucia, you have to pay for it. Can anybody talk a little bit about how do you get standards from your Bureau of Standards in St. Vincent? Is it free or do you have to buy it? Anyone? Do you guys know how to get to your standards from the Bureau of Standards? No? I can't see you, so you have to put your hands up or put something in the chat.
I just
I don't know. Yes.
I just did a quick search, and from previous academies, the Bureau of Standards does have a website. In terms of product verification and labeling and so forth, label verification, at least on the website, it says it costs $5 EC per product label.
Is that for St. Lucia or for SVG?
SVG.
Yeah. So most of them you have to pay for it, which is unfortunate. And it also creates a burden for people to get to it. So that's one of the challenges for implementing good agricultural practice. It all depends on what you are doing. There are charges for different things. Yeah. Thanks, Jan. Okay. Oh. 1 second, I'm trying to advance my slide again. Looks like I'm stuck. There we go. The other challenge is the lack of financial support. So in our regions, we don't have the dollars easily available to us from the government or from other industries. So that makes it difficult to implement those because they are not cheap. You have to have money and programs for documentation. And so that's another challenge for doing this. It also increases your production costs because if you are going to do good agricultural practices where you are in a place to be auditable, you need to do record keeping. And I like to say for record keeping, in God we trust, everybody shows paper. So if I'm gonna come to your farm and buy ingredients from you, and I don't have a record of your farm or I can't see anything, you might tell me that, but again, I wanna see it documented. For the companies that buy ingredients from the Caribbean and other places, they wanna see the records all the way back from the farm and what was growing in that farm, next to that farm. So record keeping is important, water and soil testing, and certification. And I know testing labs, we talked about it last session, they're available, but they are very hard to find and the testing costs a lot of money. I think SVG said they had a few, but a lot of the people go to Trinidad to test it and it's a little bit costly to get the product tested. Okay, so we're gonna talk about assess current practices, how to develop a plan, train farm workers, monitor records, and continuous improvement. Developing a gap plan, importance of tailoring the plan to your specific farm, because not all farms are created equal. So you have a template, but it's very important that you are tailoring your gap plan to your farm. Let's look at the key elements of the gap plan. So the first one is your farm layout. So whether it's your backyard garden, in your backyard garden, you're not gonna have a full-fledged good agricultural practice plan, but you will have elements of it, just like we talked about the chicken. We said, do not wash your chicken, but if you wash your chicken, be aware of cross-contamination. Just like if you have a backyard garden versus a regular farm, think of the elements of how do you keep your produce safe, whether it's for your family or for friends. So think about it in that level. So organize the farm for efficiency, separate areas for different crop or activities, and reducing the risk of your cross-contamination. All of those should be taken into consideration in your farm layout. And here's an example. This one is a little bit of a backyard garden. And you can see the tomatoes are towards the back, and then you have little boxes on the side. I see a lot of people will use the tires sometimes to put separate food. So how do you organize and how do you lay out your farm? Some of you, if you have a big farm, it's gonna be a formal document. If you have a backyard garden, it's gonna be as simple as just laying them out separately. Okay, here's an example of a schematic of a diagram for a map. So you have here, you have your herbs growing in one side, you have your fruits trees on the other side, vegetables. Again, we'll talk about produce, and those produce are very sensitive because once they get cross-contaminated, it's really, really, really difficult to clean them, because remember, they are not being cooked, and washing them becomes very difficult. Now, I see a chicken coop over there. You can have chicken coop, but we'll understand how critical it is to make sure that the chicken coop is not a source of cross-contamination. So it's away from everything else. So let's go into gap before planting. So before you start planting, and I know a lot of you, you're already in that phase, but just think about if you want to continue to grow. Determining your planting area exposes or poses any risk to your growth. So what animals allowed to graze there? Do you have regular floods? Chemical pollutants? So were you using pesticides or chemicals to grow? Was it a banana farm where they use a lot of pesticide when they were growing bananas? And then are you using fresh manure? And we'll talk a little bit about why fresh manure can be a problem. Once you've done your risk assessment, and you can still do that even though you're already growing, but just go back and have an idea of what that looks like for where you're growing. If you find significant risk, try to do some corrective action to manage that risk. And then document, again, in God We Trust paper, write down what steps you take to keep a record of it. And during planting, you have to be aware of the water that you're gonna use for irrigation needs. It needs to be clean. And we had a couple of big recalls in US and in Canada and in Europe on produce and cantaloupe. And one of it was because of the water that was used for the irrigation. They used it from a source that was contaminated with animal feces, and it got the food contaminated. So irrigation water is also important, that it has to be cleaned, especially if you're gonna use it on produce. If you're gonna use it on yams and food that's gonna be cooked. You still wanna keep it clean, but it's not as important because you're gonna have a further kill step. So when we say a kill step means that you're gonna cook something or you're gonna do something to the food to get rid of any contamination that's in that food. Tomatoes, when you stake tomatoes and use straw mulch to protect the edible part of the plant. So not only are you doing it so it can stay up, but you're also staking the tomatoes so they're not growing directly on the ground. Because remember, it's hard to clean those produce, and most tomatoes are used as salad and not cooked. You should not apply raw manure to your vegetable or food crops. So how many of you use raw manure, and can anybody tell me why we shouldn't use raw manure?
So some of them are what we call hot.
They're hot. Tell me a little bit more about that. You're on the right
Okay,
track.
for example, you have the coal manure and the hot manure. So the coal one would be like your rabbit feed, your rabbit dung and your cow manure, while the poultry would be hot, meaning that the hot one, if used directly where you plant and stuff, you can just burn your plants down. And at the same time, if you use them fresh, you can, cause contamination.
Yes. So raw manure, like cow manure, and those are regular, in other words, they poop, right? They feces. And we talked about feces being the #1 source of contamination. So you don't want to add feces to your soil, so you have to treat the manure, although it's really good for nutrients, but you have to treat it before you use it, especially on your wet produce, on your vegetables or fruit crops. Thank you, Jen. Again, keep animals, including your pets, out of the field because their feces can contaminate the crop. And now, during harvesting, it's even more important because now you have your fruits and vegetables. The tools that you use, make sure that they are clean and cannot be contaminated. Again, just like in your kitchen, you have to separate the tools that you use. So the tools that you use for the manure, make sure you don't use it again in your fresh produce. If you're going to use a wheelbarrow to transport the manure or the dirt, do not use that same wheelbarrow to transport your lettuce. Or if you use that same wheelbarrow, put a liner or clean it so that you are not spreading or cross-contaminating the vegetables. Again, workers who are handling the fresh produce must be healthy and follow good hygienic practices, I should say, because again, in the lettuce recall that you guys may have heard a lot about, romaine lettuce being involved in a number of recalls of bag lettuce. A lot of it is because the workers were not having adequate cleaning places to wash their hands. In California, where most of the US lettuce are grown, the fields are huge. They're like football fields, acres and acres. And those farmers go in at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. They don't have adequate bathroom facilities. So what do? They dig a hole, they use it for their facilities because they're not gonna walk all the way from one end to the other to find the facilities. And again, in these cases, which is not so much for us in the region because we are smaller, but the reason bag lettuce become an issue is if you get one lettuce head that's contaminated, that lettuce head is put into a truck of thousands of other lettuce head. It gets to the packing house. Some of them will get washed, not all of them adequately. it gets chopped up. So if you have one head of lettuce, whereas the likelihood of making somebody sick was small, now you have taken that one contaminated head of lettuce and you've chopped it up and you've mixed it up with all of the other lettuce and you've bagged it, where you created an environment for you to grow the organism. And that's how bag lettuce gets contaminated mostly. So I do not use bag lettuce. And I'm telling you, if you use bag lettuce, just be aware that it's high risk, especially for the romaine lettuce because of how it's prepared. So water handling, even though you don't have a big farm, it's important. We talked about yesterday, I think, last session where we had that vendor. There was this thing going around where this vendor was selling food and she was using the bathroom and not washing her hands, and somebody put her on blast and created a big problem for her. She lost her business. So worker handling, again, just like good hygienic practices. So in this case, we're gonna take a little break and I'm gonna give you an opportunity to spot the hazard. So can either put it in the chat or put your hands up and let me know how many hazards you see in there. Anybody can spot something wrong in this picture?
Holes in the
Yes,
gloves.
Angeline?
yes, I was going to say that, but someone else said it. The holes
I
in
didn't
the
hear.
gloves there.
Holes in the gloves, yes.
Yes.
So the holes in the glove poses two issues. Tell me what they are.
Poisoning.
Poisoning how? You're on the right track, keep going. What happened to that piece of glove? Where do you think it went?
The pieces of glove.
Yeah, so if the glove is ripped, it can create
Between.
a hazard and it gets into the food. Somebody might accidentally consume it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and your hands, now the glove, remember we talked about use of gloves. Glove is supposed to be changed in between. Now this glove is not, it's causing more hazard than protecting food. So if she has anything on her hands, it's gonna go into that fresh water. What else do we see?
The banana
Anything
on
else?
the ledge.
Going?
I'm seeing a banana on the side of the
Yeah,
whatever it is.
it's out of the water and
Yeah.
yep. Good. Janelle said the hair isn't covered properly. Don't you hate that? When you go into the restaurants and the people have their hair net, a lot of people are using it for a fashion sense. But the reason for the hairnet is to keep the hair out of the food. So if you have your hairnet, and first of all, it's the wrong hairnet because it has a lot of holes in it, the holes are too big, it's not gonna do the job that it's supposed to do. So it's not going to prevent the hair from getting in here. Sorry. Anything else you noticed?
They are not properly attired.
They're
In
not
terms of
properly attired, right? Everybody has different
apron.
clothes, yes. What about the sides of the bin? Do you see over here? It looks like it's getting moldy, right? It could be paint, but it could be from the water over there. Can you see that little greenish thing on it?
Yes,
It might
please.
be moldy, an indication that the overflowing water is not treated and it's causing contamination. And even the guy in the back, he's not using gloves. So let's continue a little bit. Okay, I'm stuck here. Let me see. Okay, here we go. So cleaning and sanitizing. We talked about cleaning and we talked about sanitizing. Cleaning gets rid of dirt. Sanitizing gets rid of bacteria. So always remember, if you are clean, you are getting the dirt out, not the bacteria. To get rid of bacteria, you have to sanitize with soap or detergent. So always remember cleaning and sanitizing. So as identified packing and storage area, equipment and tools that may be source of contamination, cleaning it regularly and sanitizing it. You have to have a standard operating procedure for your cleaning. So if you have a regular farm, a full-size farm, or even if you are doing agro-processing, for you to get certified or for you to get benefits from that, have a standard operating procedure for your workers, if you have workers, of when they clean, how they clean, what they should use for cleaning. Make sure any chemical that you use is labeled, and don't use chemical, the containers. So if you have a container that you use to store bleach, do not use it to use water. So make sure that the containers are used adequately for what they were designed to. Again, on your tools, make sure you are separating them out and keeping them off the ground for the ones that you're gonna use for your ready-to-eat produce. I'm thinking I may have skipped a whole lot of slides, but let's go. Cleaning and sanitation of the floors, packing and labeling. Can you guys give me a few minutes? I'm gonna go back because I think I missed a lot of this. One second.
Would you like me to?
No, I got it. I just thought I was missing some slides. I got it, Kathleen. Sorry for making your head hurt, guys. Okay, we're back on track. Packing and labeling, again, once we do our packing, we want to make sure that we have the labels correct, that even though it's not an official label, but what do you have, where you have it, and what's in there. Now, in this one, we say spot the hazard. Once you're ready to go out, tell me what do you see that could be better in this picture?
The food isn't covered.
The food isn't covered, and why is that important?
To prevent any bacteria or pests from entering the transported food. Also, I see that they have crates packed on each other.
And why is that bad?
It causes damage to the produce.
Right. So, and why is that from a food safety standpoint? Why is that bad?
It causes damage to the food, to the produce, which will reduce the income, because persons wouldn't want to buy damaged goods.
But what happened to? Go ahead.
Presentation is key as well, and it devalues the food itself.
Where I get food from?
Yeah. Go ahead.
So the quality of the goods that you're supposed to be exporting or selling would be less.
Right. And then what happened to the bottom of the crate? Where was that? So you see on the crate, the bottom of the crate, normally you put it on the ground, right? What happens to the bottom of the crate? So the bottom of the crate on top of the ready-to-eat produce. Look at this one here. Whatever dirt that you have in that crate is gonna be deposited right on top of your ready-to-eat tomatoes that you have there on the lettuce. So not only is it gonna bruise it, it's also gonna introduce contamination from the crate. And the wooden crate, it's really hard to clean wooden crates because it absorbs moisture. So it's gonna create a lot of problems. Anything else?
The chemical that the tomato gives off, you have to know how to place them as well, because it may the other fruits might ripe faster at a faster rate and spoil.
Yeah.
Ethanol from it.
From ethanol. There you go. Very good. And then also it's the stacking. Look how high it's stacked, right?
I think they put too much on the truck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they could fall off and get dirty.
Yeah. So for the Caribbean, I think putting a tarpaulin over it is key, because as you drive, we know how dusty and how the environment is. So putting a plastic tarpaulin over it to make sure that we're protected from excessive dust is also a key thing. So I'm gonna skip the Jeopardy part for a little bit and we'll come back to that, if you guys are okay with that. And I'm gonna talk about soil amendments. So we talked about what you have to do for your growing, for your harvesting, and for processing. So we talk about different soil amendments, and you may have talked about it in your 2 session earlier, but examples of soil amendments, a cured compost, those are amendments that has already treated. We talk about, somebody mentioned chicken manure, treated manure, and bone meal, right? So those are the treated soil amendments that you can use on your ready-to-eat vegetables without an issue, because whatever bacteria that may have been available has been treated. So those are the good soil amendments. Now, type of soil amendments and some of the risky ones. We use yard trimming, mulch, pit moss in our vegetables, and those are easy to get. I use a lot of my yard trimmings back into my garden for mulch, but I have to make sure that I dry it out first, not for bacteria, but to prevent it from growing weeds. So those are less risky. Fully cured compost, aged manure, and then the more risky one we talked about is the raw animal manure. Your water source. Let's talk about rainwater. So tell me about rainwater. How many people, by a show of hands in the chat room, believe rainwater is the best source of water for our garden? Yes, no? Yes? Is there anything wrong with rainwater?
Rainwater can be acidic sometimes, so.
It could be acidic, yes. It depends, yes. Patrice said it depends. Okay. So rainwater is an interesting one. Rainwater in and of itself is not a problem. It's actually the best water coming from the sky goes to your garden. It becomes a problem when you collect the water. So if you think about collecting water, and most people will collect water from their rooftops or from a container, and you drain it into something. So what's happening if you collect the water from your roof? You're taking all the debris, all the bird poop and everything else that's on there, and you are contaminating it with that rainwater and you're pulling it. Also depend on where you are storing your rainwater, it becomes a problem. So the rainwater by itself, if you just let the water, when it's raining, you're not collecting it, it's fine. It becomes a problem when you collect it because of where you're collecting it from and how you're storing it. A lot of us have barrels where we put the water in it, but that rainwater, if you sit there, it's not pure and you have bacteria contaminating it. And if you put it on your ready to eat produce, you can potentially contaminate it. So yes, rainwater is a good source of water. However, we have to be very careful of how we collect it and how we store it. Okay, Eureka has her hand raised. Alma? You have a question? Eureka?
Yes, ma'am. Sorry about that. What's about the pipe water? Is that because I usually store water in the barrel and I think that's the best water to water my plants?
Yes. So the pipe, when you say pipe water, you're talking about the city water?
Yeah, pipe, like water from, yeah.
Yeah, the city water is your best water. And we'll talk about it because the city will chlorinate and treat your water for you. The water you put in your barrel depends on what the condition of the barrel is, right? Is it covered? Do you have birds on it? And how long are you letting it sit for? So all of those things you have to take care of. If you are collecting water, make sure that the surface that you are collecting it from, like if you're, make sure, if you're doing it from your roof, the roof has birds and everything else on top of it and dirt, right? So you are collecting that and you get collecting the germs with it.
I never thought of that.
Yeah, so if you put like a sock or something on it to drain out whatever's in there, a mesh, and then if you are going to use a barrel, make sure your barrel is clean and sanitized. And I know in the Caribbean, we don't like to use bleach, but if you put 1 teaspoon of bleach to a gallon of water, that will keep your water safe.
Okay, because I thought like the chlorine in the water would damage the plants.
No, because remember you putting, your pipe water has chlorine in it. The chlorine you're putting in, it's a minute amount, like 1 teaspoon per gallon of water. You can't even see it.
Okay.
And it has no effect on your plant. Unless if you're doing organic, maybe.
Okay.
But it will get rid of the bacteria.
You know, we had the last spray and then we had a lot of ashes. So one of my barrel had ashes in the bottom, and then I collected the rainwater and I said probably it would be good. So that probably was a bad idea too.
No, well, maybe the ash, if you are having the ash in the bottom, could be used as a sediment. And so where are you getting the water from? From the top or from the bottom?
From the top. It's settled at the bottom.
So the ash is in the bottom. So
but the top is very clean.
Yeah, the top is, so then that could be that the ash could be served as like they use in the water treatment center, they use charcoal as a filter. So the ash could potentially be a filter for you for the water.
Okay. What's about things like lemongrass? I think I saw one time, not in this country, probably Africa. They're using lemongrass, and I think there's another one, not basil. I don't know if you can remember if it's the mint, like to water the plant. They put it in the barrel, let it decompose, and use the water.
There's no proof of that, but they say yes, those can act as natural antibacterial agent, but I don't have any data that says that's proven.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you.
Yeah. So again, if you have the rainwater by itself, it's not a problem. It's how you source it and how you store it.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. One second, I'm trying to move forward here. I'm stuck again, Caitlin. There we go. River water is another source of water. So I know we have the river water and we use it, but again, very similar to rainwater. It's surface water and you have animals in there. So if you're going to use river water, do not use it on your fresh produce. Use it for ground irrigation, but not on your fresh produce. And like I said, municipality water is actually the best water from a food safety standpoint, because the municipality has the responsibility of making sure the water is treated before it's used. Again, so rainwater is the riskiest based on how you store it. River water and the municipality water is the cleanest. Now, I don't want you to go and say, Theo, say don't use rainwater. I'm saying if you use rainwater, make sure you understand where you're collecting it from and how you're storing it, especially if you're going to use it on your fresh produce.
One point of note for us here in the Grenadines, the water we use, we catch it from on our roofs that go into our tanks. So that's what we drink. So for us, that's safe water. As you say, it depends on how you gather your water, because in most houses you will have mesh and so forth to ensure that the water is strained before it enters the tanks.
Yeah. Now, water scarcity is a big problem around the world, right? And so one of the things that they do for water, it's they reuse wastewater for drinking, like in India and in some of those places. Now, the water is treated and it will not cause harm, but just the thought of when people think you take in wastewater, recycling it, and then you have to drink it, the perception makes people, it's an up factor. So when you think about water scarcity and how important water is, it's how do we treat the water to make sure we have enough and we're using it safely. Because contaminated water can spread from one piece of produce to your entire crop during washing. Remember earlier I talked about the bag lettuce. As they go through and they wash all of this cut up lettuce, it's contaminating the whole batch of lettuce. And if you look at your produce, once that produce is contaminated with a pathogen, it cannot easily be removed. Think about a head of lettuce and how it is, it's not clean. You may be able to move the dirt on it, but if you have bacteria on it, it's really, really, really difficult to remove it. So you want to prevent it from getting there in the first place. So we talked about the probability of contamination from water. Public water supply is the safest one, and then the surface water. Groundwater is in the middle because it's coming from the bottom. It doesn't get as contaminated as on the surface water, where you can have the animals and everything from the environment drained into it. And not only bacteria, but you can also have chemical contaminant in your water. We talk about irrigation of water irrigation, and we have drip or trickle irrigation, the least risky one, because you are dripping it from the side. Flood is more risky. because if you have bad water, you're flooding it. And overhead is even riskier. Now, overhead is risky because if you have contaminated water and you put it over you're flooding your fruits and vegetables, then you contaminate all your water. Now, if your overhead irrigation is using filtered water, not too much of a problem, but most of the irrigation water that we use, it's coming from a source that's probably not conducive for that. So when you think about irrigation, drip irrigation or trickle, so where it's not flooding your produce spot that you're gonna consume versus overhead. Now, most of those become important for your produce, your fruits and vegetables. Any product that you are going to grow that's gonna get cooked, the risk is not as high because you have a kill step. You're going to cook it. You don't want to mix it with your ready-to-eat fruits, but most of the things we're talking about is going to be for produce and fruits and vegetables that is going to be eaten as is and not cooked. We talked about this one. Now, water testing, if you're using the city water, you don't have to test it. But on from a food safety standpoint, both from a chemical and from a microbial standpoint, we should at least test our water if we are going to use well water, river water, or rainwater, or some source that's not the city water. We should test it about 4 times a year during the growing season, and then about 4 times a year for the most risky water. Now, I know testing is a challenge because by the time we get into the tested lab, it's costly, and then we don't have a lab that's easy access. So in light of not having testing facilities, make sure we use prevention. How often do you think water testing happen in St. Vincent? Is that a common practice? I know in St. Lucia not, but in St. Vincent, is it? How many people?
Any question?
The question was, how prevalent is testing our water for our farming purpose? Is that a common practice?
No, it's not.
Yeah, I didn't think so. And it's because that it's expensive, it's not available, and then when we have it, it takes, by the time you get the results, the water has been gone, the food's been consumed. So in that case, we have to try to practice prevention. Okay, let's keep going. Sorry, I'm having a hard time and my slide doesn't go as fast. Oh. Okay, here we go. So let's not forget about the ice. So ice, 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 ice. Why is ice a problem? Is ice a
People say
problem?
ice don't carry germs, but it's not true.
Because the perception is that ice do not carry germs. Exactly, but that's a myth. Ice is a big culprit for contamination because remember I said the bacteria, it will not grow in the ice, but it will survive. And when it melts, then the bacteria starts to grow. So ice is actually a good way to preserve bacteria. So when you go out, and then we were traveling last week, and in an underdeveloped area of of Africa, and they don't have filtration system for water. So they gave us bottled water to brush our teeth. And everybody did bottled water and everything else. But when we went out to dinner, people forgot, and they had cocktails and drinks and juice, and they had ice in it. And a few people got sick, and they were thinking, why? Because the water that we use, if the water is contaminated, you form ice with it, you put your ice in your drink, and that will cause the bacteria, especially if the water is highly contaminated, the ice then becomes a source of contamination. So beware of the ice. I think most people, if they use the ice to store food, will not reuse it. But even the city water, when you use the ice, it causes a problem. Or if you use the ice on your produce to keep it cold, that could be a problem. So let's not forget the ice when we talk about water. So if and when you have to test your water, in the city water, they should be looking for this in their testing. So E. coli is the #1 source of contamination for water. And remember I said E. coli is from mostly feces. If your E. coli count is less than 100 per 100 ml of water, your quality is really good. And that's what the city water should be using. And that's why it's okay. If the count is between 100 and 500, we have to take precautions. And if you have E. coli count over 500 per 100 ml, then that water needs to be retested and treated. So let me see again, holding time, treating the water with chlorine. A little bit of chlorine goes a long way. So I'm gonna stop here for a little bit and see if you guys have any question on what we talked about water, about GAP, before I go on. Yes, Miss Maloney? You have your hands up or you didn't put it down? Yuriska?
Yes, ma'am. What's about purification tablets? If I have that and I put it in water.
That's perfect.
That's perfect.
Yes. If you can get it and if you can add it to your water, that's perfect.
So that same water, can I wet my plant with?
Yes.
Okay, because I had a drum of water. And I have to read to see how many I need to put in a drum of water.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was wondering if, because it smell like the chlorine, so I say that it probably might kill the plant.
No, so with the chlorine smell, okay, if you go in, when you go to swimming pools, let's put it this way. And then when you go to the swimming pool area and you smell a high smell of chlorine, is that good or that bad? Most likely we think the more chlorine I feel, the cleaner it is, but it's not good. Because the chlorine that you have to use for it to be effective, you will not smell it.
Okay.
Yeah, you cannot, if you use the right amount, like I said, 1 teaspoon in a gallon of water, that's all you need.
Okay.
And you shouldn't be able to smell it at all. If you are smelling it, that means you've used too much.
Too much, all right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Now, some people said they can use vinegar. Again, vinegar can help. I don't have any studies that show how effective it is, but just by people said vinegar can help. I don't have to tell you what quantity to add, but some people have used it and they said it's okay.
Well, I use vinegar in water to wash my vegetables like lettuce and And this stuff, I don't know how effective, but before I use any vegetable that I'm going to have raw, I use vinegar.
Yeah, some people say that. I use a little bit of chlorine in my vegetable. My family think I'm a cuckoo.
That one is new to me though. That like washing it, the other lecturer said it, and I was like, okay, that's something. Yeah.
Some people also say using lemon will help because of the acidity. So those are the other little things, but it's just you don't know how much. When you use chlorine, you know exactly how to quantify it, and you know it's been proven. But I know it's considered a chemical, and people want natural. But I'll take a little bit of chlorine over getting salmonella. Yeah. Was there another question?
Yes, I have a question.
Because
it has been said that you can use urine to water your plants, and some persons do use it to water their lettuce, etc. What's your take on it? Is it? Some persons do use it for that.
Okay, so let me ask you, would you want me to get the lettuce that I peed on? How would you feel if I come to my house and I give you a nice fresh bowl of salad and I told you I peed on it?
Well, I wouldn't like that, but you won't know because a lot of persons use it as manure.
Again, it goes back to think about urine. And urine, the reason why people are saying use urine, because in some cases, the urease part of the urine, it's gonna kill some stuff. But when you think about people, you don't know what they have, where the source of the urine is coming from. There's all kinds of ickiness that goes with urine. So I would not recommend that you use urine in your produce. It's just like using fresh manure. That is a no. I know the reason why, because of the urease in the urine, but I would not recommend using urine. It's just disgusting because you don't know, you have no control of it. If the person has antibiotics in the system, all kinds of things.
Another question regarding the manure, animal manure, for example, sheep and cow manure. Is it safe, like, for example, if I put it in water, like if I put it for a couple of days in some water and then manure my plants, so that be safer?
No, it's actually worse because now you're letting it grow. So what you want to do the manure is you want to let it cure, like let it dry out somewhere or bake it. And so what you're doing, you're drying it out and you're killing the bacteria that's in it. If you put it in water and it's raw, so you've now actually made it even more conducive to growth. So you want to do the opposite. You want to put it someplace where you can dry it in the sun or bake it or do something to cure it.
Okay.
Okay. How do you treat raw manure? So raw manure, like I said, you can put it out for to dry in the sun. The ones that you manufacture, they actually bake it at a low level to dry it.
So is it safe to plant your stuff in tires? Because some persons say there are a lot of chemicals and so forth in the tires.
So yes, you can have the chemical leaching out of the tires, but if you put some liner or put other enough so it's not leaching, the tire part is the leaching from a chemical standpoint. Yes. So you have to be careful.
So that would be the same thing when it comes to plastic.
Yep. Okay. Again, we just have to be aware. That doesn't mean that you stop doing everything. The tire you put your flowers in there. And if you put your tires for your vegetables, maybe you put everything around it and you just use the center part of it so it's not leaching too much in there. All right, thank you. Let's go back now and talk a little bit about Tristan. Anisha, did you have a question? Anisha, I see you had your hands up.
Good night, everybody. I was wondering because I know they have this thing where people would say that you don't water plants during the day when the sun is out. But I was having this problem where I had some lettuce the other day and the sun was so hot. And during the day, I would water them in the morning, and during the day, about midday-ish, they'd be dry and starting to like faintish like. So I would have gone around and I would have been watering mine. But I was warned that I should not have been doing it. But I don't know what is the general reason why they would have said that I shouldn't have done it. But I'm being honest, I had a proper yield because I would have been giving them the nutriments of the water during that period of time. I don't know if I shouldn't have been doing it at the point in time as I was being warned not to do it, but I was giving them a little, and then in the afternoon I would give them that much to carry them through the night until the morning I give them back and stuff like that. But it did work, but I don't know if that
So
was
the
right.
reason why they say not to water the plants in the hot sun, it's nothing to do with food safety. Again, this is me secondhand, is that it will cause the plant, like it's hot and you put water on it, it causes the plant to wilt, it prevents the growth and the nutrients, it damages the root stem because you're actually putting like hot water on it while it's still hot. That's what I was told. But it's not from a food safety standpoint.
Oh, but I had rainwater from my drums, and they're more in a cool area.
Yeah, so you should be fine.
Okay, then thanks.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to talk about, and that's a big part of good agricultural practices, is traceability. And I know again that we are not that far ahead in traceability. Is not something that is big for us. But if you're going to have to send food out, traceability becomes important. Because you want to know from the farm to the shoppers. Right now in the developed countries, there's an app. You can go in, and if I buy an apple, I can scan it and I can tell what farm my apple was grown in. I don't know if I want to know that much about it, but people want to. And it can be able to trace. The reason why traceability becomes a food safety issue in the developed countries especially, but also in the underdeveloped countries, is if you have an illness, you want to know the source. So you want to know at what point in the supply chain, if you had a contamination, and if you want to recall that food, how far back you can go. So you can trace it back to say it was on my farm. And if you have good agricultural practices, if there's a recall, you can say, well, I can say without a doubt, this was not from my farm. And then you can go back and say the contamination maybe happened in my packing house or in transportation at the border crossing. A big area for contamination, if you are doing agro-processing, is during the processing of the food or at distribution in supermarkets. It's another big place where you can cross contamination. So as we get better at it, and as we grow in the region, we'll have to start practicing traceability. But for you, as small farmers, what you need to do is be able to know where you're getting your ingredients from, who's providing you with the seeds, where you're getting your manure from, where you're using it, how you're packing it, who you're selling it to, so you can protect yourself if there is an issue, or you can identify an issue and say, hey, here's where it was, and now how do I take care of it? If you are an ingredient supplier, if you want to import ingredients like cocoa beans or any other ingredients you want to sell, the people who are going to buy it from you, if you export it, will want to know your traceability system. So for now, I want you guys to think about it, not from the big scale of traceability we call it from farm to table, is in your own little garden, try to trace what came where, what went to produce, what went to market, and how are you selling it. So just keep a record of it. Recalls. How many recalls have you had, food recall, have you had in St. Vincent in the last 5 years that you're aware of? 0, 1, 2, 3? None?
I think I can recall, they had a recall. Well, I guess it was all over the world. They had beef. There was, I think it was Fabuloso, one of them, disinfectant thingy.
Yes. So, yes.
There was milk, a baby milk.
Right.
Something else.
Cereal. So recall is an important part of the food safety system globally. In our neck of the wood, not so much, because first of all, we don't have a place to trace it. We won't know where to get it. And we don't have a big supply chain like the rest of the world do. But recall is very, 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 very common in the developed countries. Any given day in one region, you're going to have hundreds of recall. The number one recall from food safety standpoint in the US is allergen, people getting sick from allergen. The second one is, we talked about it, food poison from Campylobacter. A recall is if somebody has, if you have an outbreak is more, 1 or 2 people got sick from eating the same food. Now, whoever is selling that food is responsible for being able to know where each piece of that food was distributed. So imagine, come with me for a little bit. So I had my last recall before I retired was a cereal recall. Now, Kellogg makes cereal. It was shredded wheat. And Kellogg sells cereals in every part of the world. Now, my job was to be able to go back within 24 hours of being notified that there was an illness with people eating cereal, and be able to go back and know where each box of cereal was sold and distributed globally within 24 hours and pull it off the shelf. Unfortunately, in the Caribbean, when we have those foods, those recall notices never get to our shores. So in that cereal recall, a year later, when I came to St. Lucia, sure enough, I was able to find a box of cereal from that recall time frame that was never removed from the shelves. So as much as we don't have recall products within our region, but the food we bring in, if it is recalled, it very seldom gets to us. So for us as farmers for that group, it's not as critical for us to have a recall plan right now, but that's where traceability comes in. So if you have an issue of how and where it was, as we go into agritourism, or as we get more people coming to our shores and eating food from our hotels, if they get sick, they'll come back and want to know where the food is. The hotel will gonna have to know, where did I get the fruits from? How did people get sick? And be held accountable. So recall for us right now in the region, maybe not a big deal, but it gets impacted because of food that we buy on the shelves. Okay? We talked about record keeping. If you do good agricultural practices, you need to be able to document, whether it's on the computer, on a notebook, anywhere that you have it, it must be able to document what you did, when you did it, who did it, and how you did it. If you are going to get a health certificate, the health certificate officer is going to want to come in and make sure that you have documentation. On your farm, you need to document what seed you use, what manure you use, when you harvested it, what sanitizer that you use. If you're doing agro processing, again, documentation even becomes more critical. And it doesn't have to be complicated, but I want you guys to start thinking in your head about, okay, how do I start my record keeping? And don't say it doesn't matter. It's just start to think in that mindset, whether it's a backyard garden or a big farm. So in God we trust, everybody else show paper. And with this, talking about document, Kathleen, are you still on? Kathleen?
Yes, I will get I'm just trying to get the document ready.
All right, so what we are going to talk about is our food safety plan. I hope you guys had a chance to take a look at it. It's a sample of what you would need for your farm. And what I've done is given you a framework. For some of you, it might be more applicable than others. But again, remember of what piece can you use, if not everything from it. So when Kathleen pulls it up, we'll start with the document, take a look at it, see what you can put on there. I gave you some examples that you will see, and then we can talk about it.
Good evening, everyone. Again, this is the digital journal that Theo was referencing, which has a myriad of resources also mentioned. Please, it was shared with you at the beginning of the course and really can be used for life. We're going to go straight down to the food safety section.
As Kathleen goes through that, I hope you guys are taking advantage of that journal. Again, in God we trust, everybody else show paper. If you take that journal for each of the section, we have pieces on there, and make that your little Bible. And it helps you when you go back after the course, you'll have something that you can document and go back and review. So for ours, we do our farm food safety plan. So when you do your assessment, remember, thanks, Caitlin. I wanted you to go back and look at each of the questions. That's how you're going to do an assessment of your farm. So you say, do you, or yes or no. So if each of you who has a farm or even a backyard, you can go in and ask the question, do you operate a farm that grows or makes fruits or vegetables? You answer yes or no. If you have employees, yes or no. Do you have a flush or portable toilet on your farm? You irrigate any produce or acreage? Use water from an on-farm well for irrigation and spray? And again, well water, we talked about rainwater, that's important, yes or no. Keep going, Caitlin. Are you using chemical or pesticides? So basically, this is gonna give you an assessment of where you are if you say yes or no. So now, once you have that, go to the next one, Caitlin. Again, you keep asking your produce, your own compost or purchase it for land application. Do you apply the compost tea or on your produce area? Do you have farm animals that are sources of manure or field? All right, do you pack produce in the field? Do you have a packing shed on the farm? So let me ask a question. If you have anybody who's farming, why would it be important if you have a packing shed? Why would, from a food safety standpoint, why would that be important? Even though you don't have one, from what we learned, why would a packing shed be important?
To make sure that you always have a clean area free from contamination, and that an area that you could only use for your produce and your crops that you produce.
Exactly, Anisha, because again, you've taken all this time to harvest, to grow. Your packing shed, normally it's a high risk area because now you have your produce, and if you don't take care of it, like we saw when they were doing the bananas, it could be a source of contamination. Storage is also a big problem, or direct marketing your produce from a farm stand, a farmer's market, or community-supported agriculture adventure. All of those are going to be important so you know how to create your food safety plan. Keep going. So what I gave you in the other forms to help you with, here's an example of what should be included in your farm and your food safety plan, but it's not all inclusive, and some of them are applicable and others are not. The location of your farm and how you managing your land, what crop type are you producing? Is it produce, roots, spices? What do you grow on there? You should know that. Company health and hygiene policy for workers. If you have workers, what is your policy? Again, not just tell me I asked them to wash their hands, but you have to have something that shows that they wash their hands. It protects you, it protects the consumer. What chemicals do you use and how do you record it? What is your soil amendment, manure usage? So can you imagine if you have a farm and then you're going out to sell to a hotel, if you are the farmer that can demonstrate, hey, here's my plan, immediately that puts you ahead of the line of somebody who else is coming and do not have that. It builds confidence in what you're selling. So those are the things when you think about a food safety plan, if you don't have one. And it doesn't have to be complicated. As much as you can, start building on it. Keep going, Kathleen. So this one is the template that you use. So if you have one, you can just populate the template, the name of your farm, your business, who is the contact person, what certification does that person have. And when you guys think about going for loans as well, and we'll talk about that in your financial literacy, that information can go in there for your farm if you want to get a loan as well. Again, that assessment form, you put it into take the homework that you had from before and transport it into your plan. Keep going, Kathleen. We can go through it quickly, I think. Okay. So harvest produce from the field or greenhouse using hand labor, you pack your produce in the field. All of that is going to be critical to your food safety plan. Keep going, Caitlin, thank you. Next page. So this form here, this page here is for your resources. If you are going to use a food safety plan, then we put in here some examples of what's best practice and some of them that needs improvement. So when you've done your assessment, let's look at management area. If you say grading and quality during harvest and crop, a best practice is workers are trained to avoid harvesting bruised or dropped fruits and any produce with evidence of bird feces or feeding marks. That's your best practice. Then, Caitlin, go back up a little bit, up. A little bit more, yeah, okay. So your best practice for this area would be this part. Minor adjustments needed if you have bruised or dropped fruits or crop with evidence of animals or feces. So this says it's not bad, but I need minor adjustment. If you go to the very right of it where you need improvement, you have no standards, no instruction to workers to avoid bruised or dropped fruits or produce with evidence of animal or pieces of feeding. That's where you're gonna have to start saying, okay, what do I need to do in my food safety plan to get to best practice? Right? So after you answer those questions, if you find that you are in the needs improvement, how do you prioritize that? And as you go down to the list, go down, Caitlin, each of those sections will tell you what is the best practice, where is concern, and where you need improvement. So once you have done that, if you have a farm or agro-processing, it applies to both. Keep going. So I gave you a list of all of those items, and then here you can create your own. And what action that you have to do to get you to best practice. So even if you are not all the way to bright, showing that you are working on something, that you have it, is gonna go a long way. Okay, so that is your template that you can use for a food safety plan for your farm or your agro-processing, big or small. I want you to take the time after this class and then be able to do that. You can use it for selling, for getting a loan, and just for managing the overall food safety culture of your plan. So do you have any questions on the food safety plan? And it's not only for if you're gonna import food, it's also for if you're making food for your farm or small farms or just for a hotel or understand. It's just creating a culture of practicing safe food. Does anybody have anything right now on your farm that's even close to a food safety plan? No? Okay. Well, so that's the end of where I am for today's session. And I leave time here about 10 minutes where we can use it for discussion on anything we talked about last session or this session. And the next session, which is on Thursday, we will talk about organic farming, we'll talk about GMO, we'll talk about certification. That will be our last session. Okay, Miss Elma, Yuriska, you had your hands up.
Yes, I have a backyard farming. I started, but I feel like now I have to do everything over, demolish everything and do it over because I've been doing everything wrong. So I feel like, I would have to start over with that.
I wouldn't say start over. What I would say is use your farm that you have and build on what you have. So like your rainwater, right? If you're using rainwater, so now instead of storing it, maybe go and put a mesh on where the water is collecting, or that you cover it, or that you use a little bit of chlorine or vinegar, whichever one you want in it. So to improve it, don't stop using it, just find ways you can make it better than where it is now.
Because like
so don't start all over, just build
it's like the preparation of the soil. Like I remember the first lecture I used to just throw peeling, just send the peeling there. You talk about the ice tonight. When I clean my deep fridge, I used to like just gather the ice and just put it around the roots. So it's just like a lot of contamination.
Yeah.
So just, so that has enlightened me so much, that have been doing a lot of things. Because when I look at the plants, they are sending little things, but I mean, the look of it, they are not looking healthy.
Yeah. And remember, most of those are not for your roots. Your roots that you are going to boil, like your yam and your edibles and things that you are going to cook, you can get away with it. The focus will be on
And the raw
produce
stuff.
and fruits, where they don't get cooked, you're eating it raw. That's at the highest risk one, and that's where you would prioritize your focus.
Okay.
So don't throw away everything. I know it's scary, but just say, how do I make it better and build on it? Yeah?
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh.
Question? Yes.
Yes, Angeline?
Is it safe to plant like stuff in old paint buckets, etc.? Well, I'm talking about like food like tomatoes and peppers and things like that.
To plant them in what?
Old paint buckets, because I know paints, they have chemicals, etc.
No, again, it's not from a microbial food safety standpoint. It's from a chemical standpoint. You may not want to use food in paint because what happens, the plant from their roots, they are taking the chemical, and you guys gets incorporated into your fruits, and you never know what traces you'll get back in your food. So in general, I would say no.
Okay, thanks.
Again, any other questions on anything we talked about in your refrigerator, did anybody think differently when they went home and look at the refrigerator differently? I know Elma looked at her farm and like, oh my God, did you look at differently? Did you go in
Yes.
and check to say, okay, how is my fridge clean? Even when you go to the restaurant. So if you learn anything, it's first of all, when you go back, be aware, right?
Yeah.
Keep your eyes open when you go to the street fairs, to the carnival, and you're eating. Is that person using their hands to make food? Where they go into the bathroom? They've been there all day. What do they do for bathroom? For me, when I go out to those things, I just buy the thing that's cooking right there on the flame and making sure they're not using that same fork to take the cooked food out and put the raw food back on. So all of this is about awareness, not for you to become professionals right away, but be a little bit aware. If you get a chance to go in a restaurant, check the bathroom, check the kitchen. Awareness. Okay. Last call, we have 8 minutes. We build time because I know you guys would give me some discussion. Okay. If not, then we'll leave early. Kathleen, any last